Doctor refused a poor boy's mother's surgery without payment, but a billionaire did the unthinkable. The boy's scream cut through the hospital corridor like glass shattering. Monitors beeped faster, a gurney skidded to a halt, and a nurse's hand froze inches from the curtain as the doctor said the words no one was supposed to hear in an emergency room. "We can't proceed," he snapped, eyes flicking to the clipboard, then to the woman slumped in the wheelchair. "There's no authorization. No payment." The boy stepped forward, hands raised as if prayer could stop blood, his voice cracking as he begged, but the doctor had already turned away, signaling for security. Somewhere down the hall, an elevator chimed, indifferent. The mother's head lolled, sweat shining on her brow, lips gray. She tried to speak, tried to say please, but the pain stole the word and left a wet gasp. The boy grabbed the doctor's coat, small fingers digging into expensive fabric, and the doctor shook him off, sharp and clean, like brushing lint from a sleeve. "Rules are rules," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The boy fell back against the wall, stunned, as two orderlies hesitated, eyes darting between policy and pulse. In the waiting area, a man in a dark suit looked up from his phone, and the air seemed to tighten around him. The corridor smelled of antiseptic and fear. The woman's name, Maribel, was written in careful ink on her wristband, now smudged. The boy Jonah read it over and over as if the letters could keep her here. "She'd die," he said, not shouting, not accusing, just stating a fact with the clarity of a child who had already learned too much. The doctor stopped, irritation flashing. "I won't risk my license," he replied. "This is a hospital, not a charity." His words echoed, hard and absolute. Behind the glass of the nurse's station, staff exchanged looks. One nurse whispered, "She's bleeding internally," and another answered, "We need the OR." The doctor's jaw tightened. "We need a guarantee," he said. Now, security stepped closer. Jonah's shoulders shook, but he didn't move from the wheelchair. He wrapped his arms around his mother's knees, as if holding on could anchor her to the floor. The man in the suit stood. He was tall, composed, his presence quiet but unmistakable, like a storm that hasn't announced itself yet. He watched the doctor, then the boy, then the mother, his eyes lingering on the tremor in Jonah's hands. He walked closer, shoes silent on linoleum, and asked a simple question. "How long do we have?" The doctor looked him up and down, assessing clothes, watch, the way people do when deciding who matters. "Minutes," he said curtly. "If we had authorization." The man nodded once. "Then move," he said. The doctor scoffed. "And who are you?" The man didn't answer. He turned to the nurse. "Prep the OR," he said, voice low, certain. "Type O negative ready. Call anesthesia." The nurse hesitated, then moved. Something in his tone cut through doubt. The doctor stepped forward, angry now. "You don't give orders here," he snapped. "This isn't how it works." The man finally met his gaze. "It is today." Security shifted, uncertain. The corridor filled with tension, the kind that makes even breathing feel loud. Jonah looked up at the stranger, hope flickering like a fragile match. "Please," he whispered, not knowing why he trusted him, only that he did. The doctor blocked the gurney with an arm. "Payment," he said. "Now?" He extended his hand, palm up, a gesture that turned the room cold. The man reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and the doctor's eyes sharpened. He pulled out a card, not a credit card, not cash. A simple white card with a name embossed in black. The doctor glanced at it and froze. Color drained from his face as recognition hit. He looked again, then up, then back down, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something safer. That's not possible," he stammered. The man took the card back. "It is," he said quietly. And if she doesn't make it to surgery in the next 60 seconds, the impossible will be the least of your problems." The hallway erupted into motion. The gurney rolled. Curtains flew. A nurse called out vitals. Jonah ran alongside, fingers brushing his mother's hand until the doors swung shut and left him staring at his reflection in steel. The doctor stood rooted, sweat beading at his hairline, the weight of his choice pressing down like a hand on his chest. In the waiting room, the man sat beside Jonah without asking. He loosened his tie and placed it on the chair, a small human gesture in a place ruled by machines. "What's your mom's favorite song?" he asked gently. Jonah blinked, confused. "Why?" "Because," the man said, "people fight harder when they're remembered as more than a chart." Jonah swallowed. "She likes the one about the ocean," he said. "She says it makes her feel brave." The man nodded. He pulled out his phone not to make a call, but to play the song softly, tinny through the speaker, filling the space with something warmer than fear. Around them, people watched, whispering. Someone Googled the name on the card and gasped. Another shook their head, disbelief giving way to awe. In the operating wing, alarms flared and steadied. Hands moved with precision. The surgeon summoned from another floor took over without ceremony. Blood was replaced. Time stretched thin. Back in the corridor, the doctor paced. Every few steps he looked toward the OR doors, then toward the waiting room where the man sat with the boy, unshaken. A nurse approached the doctor, voice low. "You should have let us," she said. "You almost didn't," he snapped. "I followed policy." She met his eyes. "You followed money." Minutes later, a surgical resident burst through the doors, breathless. "She's stable," he announced. The waiting room exhaled. Jonah sagged against the man, relief collapsing his knees. The man steadied him with a hand on his shoulder, firm and kind. "She's still fighting," he said. "And so are you." Jonah looked up, eyes shining. "Who are you?" he asked. The man smiled faintly. "Someone who hates closed doors," he said. "And someone who remembers what it's like to be told no when yes is the only answer." Across the hall, the doctor watched the exchange, dread pooling in his stomach. He knew then that the surgery was only the beginning, that the refusal, spoken so easily, had been heard by the wrong man at the worst possible time. And whatever came next would not be paid for with money alone. The doors to the operating wing sealed with a final hiss, and the hospital seemed to remember how to breathe again. But the relief in the waiting room was fragile, brittle as thin ice. Jonah sat rigid, staring at the red line of light above the OR doors, counting each flicker as if it were a heartbeat. The man beside him didn't speak for a long time. He simply stayed, a steady presence in a place built for departures. Across the corridor, the doctor finally noticed how quiet it had become around him. Conversations that usually bent around authority now moved without him. Nurses passed without eye contact. An administrator approached, voice clipped. "We need a report," she said. "Immediately." "I followed protocol," the doctor replied, louder than necessary. "You saw the file." "I saw the patient," the administrator said. "And I saw a delay that almost killed her." The doctor opened his mouth, then closed it. He watched Jonah from the corner of his eye, watched the way the boy's hands shook even when he tried to still them. He told himself again that rules existed for a reason, that compassion without structure was chaos, that he had done nothing wrong. The words felt thinner each time. In the waiting room, whispers spread. Someone showed a screen to someone else. Eyes widened. A woman leaned over to Jonah and asked softly if he needed water. Another offered a jacket. Kindness, delayed, arrived all at once. "Your mom's tough," the man said gently. "Tougher than this building." Jonah nodded, then frowned. They said she needed money, he said. We don't have any. He looked down at his shoes, the toes worn thin. Is she going to be okay because of you? The man didn't answer immediately. He chose his words like instruments. She's going to be okay because people decided to do the right thing, he said. Sometimes they just need a push. A nurse emerged from the OR wing and crossed directly to the man. She lowered her voice. Mr. Hawley, she said. The surgeon asked if you'd like an update in private. Jonah looked up. Hawley? He repeated that. The man smiled apologetically. I should have said, he murmured. My name is Lucas Hawley. The name landed with a soft thud that rippled outward. A man across the room sucked in a breath. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, Hawley Group, like a prayer and a warning all at once. Lucas Hale, the billionaire philanthropist whose foundations funded half the city's clinics, whose endowments carried names etched in stone, whose companies employed tens of thousands. The man who could buy silence and chose, instead, to sit on a plastic chair beside a frightened boy. Lucas didn't stand when the murmurs grew. He didn't acknowledge them at all. He looked only at Jonah. Do you want to come hear how she's doing? He asked. Jonah nodded, overwhelmed. They followed the nurse into a small consultation room. The surgeon was waiting, sleeves rolled, eyes tired but bright. She had a ruptured spleen, he said without preamble. We controlled the bleeding. She lost a lot of blood, but she's stable. The next few hours are critical. Jonah's knees buckled. Lucas caught him before he fell. She's alive, Lucas said firmly. That's the first victory. The surgeon cleared his throat. We'll need post-op care, he added. Monitoring, imaging, it won't be cheap. Asterisk. Lucas nodded. Send it to my office. The surgeon hesitated. Mr. Hawley. Send it, Lucas repeated. And make sure nothing slows it down. Outside, the administrator was already on the phone. We have a situation, she said. Yes, he's here. No, not visiting, intervening. She paused, listening. I know. The doctor hovered near the nurse's station, pretending to review charts. He heard his name spoken softly, then not softly at all. He saw the administrator approach with 2 security officers. His heart thudded. We need you in conference room B, she said. Now? Inside the room, the walls felt closer. HR sat at the table. Compliance. Legal. The administrator closed the door. We're opening an investigation, she said. Effective immediately. For what? The doctor demanded. I told you, I followed. You denied emergency care, Legal interrupted. You used payment as a condition. You physically removed a minor. I didn't. We have witnesses, HR said. Video statements. The doctor's face flushed. This is because of him, he said bitterly. Because he's rich. The administrator's gaze was steady. This is because a woman almost died, she said. And because a child begged you? Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Back in the waiting room, Lucas sat with Jonah again. The song about the ocean played softly, looping. Jonah stared at the floor. Is he in trouble? He asked suddenly. Lucas considered. Consequences aren't trouble, he said. They're lessons. Jonah nodded slowly. My mom says lessons are supposed to hurt a little. Lucas smiled. Your mom sounds wise. Hours passed. The red light turned green. A nurse brought updates. Stable. Resting. The waiting room thinned, but Lucas didn't leave. When night fell, he ordered food for Jonah and sat across from him. Listening as the boy talked about school, about how his mom laughed when she was tired, about the way she sang even when she didn't know the words. You know, Jonah said quietly, they always think we're lying. Lucas's eyes softened. I know. How? Because once, Lucas said, choosing the truth, people thought the same about me. Jonah looked up, startled. You? Lucas nodded. A long time ago. Different building. Same look. The doctor emerged from conference room B, pale and shaken. His badge had been taken. Security walked him past the waiting room. He avoided Jonah's eyes. As he passed Lucas, their gazes met. Lucas didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He simply said, "Next time, listen." The doctor opened his mouth, then closed it. The doors slid shut behind him. Near midnight, the surgeon returned with a small smile. "You can see her," he said. "Just for a minute." Jonah stood, heart racing. Lucas walked him to the ICU doors and stopped. "I'll wait here," he said. Jonah hesitated. "Will you still be here?" Lucas nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." Inside, machines hummed. Maribel lay pale but alive, eyes fluttering open as Jonah whispered her name. She squeezed his fingers weakly. Tears slid down his cheeks, silent and unstoppable. When Jonah came back out, Lucas stood. "She's strong," Jonah said, voice breaking. She said thank you. Lucas smiled. "Tell her she's welcome." As dawn crept through the windows, administrators moved with purpose. Emails flew. Policies were pulled and rewritten. A press team arrived, then stopped short when Lucas shook his head. "Not yet," he said. "Do the work first." The hospital, built on rules and revenue, felt the ground shift beneath it. And Jonah, sitting beside the man who had opened the door when it mattered, began to understand something powerful. That sometimes the unthinkable wasn't paying for a surgery. It was refusing to let indifference survive the night. Morning didn't arrive all at once. It seeped into the hospital like a cautious promise, thin light through high windows, the smell of disinfectant warmed by coffee carts, footsteps softer than the night shift's weary drag. Jonah watched it happen from the ICU waiting area, his chin resting on folded arms, eyes burning from too little sleep and too much fear. Every few minutes he glanced at the glass wall, half expecting the machines inside to suddenly go quiet again. They didn't. Instead, a nurse adjusted a drip. Another checked a monitor and nodded. Life continued, stubborn and unremarkable, and that alone felt miraculous. Lucas returned with 2 cups hot chocolate for Jonah, black coffee for himself. "They'll let her wake properly in a few hours," he said, handing the cup over. "Doctors like their numbers steady before the world rushes back in." Jonah wrapped both hands around the cup. Are you really a billionaire?" he asked, not looking up. Lucas smiled faintly. "That word makes it sound like I keep the money in a cave somewhere. But everyone knows your name." "People know my companies," Lucas corrected. "Names stick when they're printed enough times." Jonah nodded, absorbing this. "Why did you help us?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. He watched a janitor mop the floor with slow, deliberate strokes. "Because I've been the kid nobody listened to," he said finally. "And because hospitals should never feel like borders." Jonah frowned. "Borders?" "Places where only certain people are allowed to cross," Lucas said gently. The boy let that settle. "Will that doctor go to jail?" "Probably not," Lucas said. "But he won't forget tonight." That seemed to satisfy Jonah more than punishment ever could. Downstairs, the hospital board convened an emergency meeting. Coffee went untouched. Phones buzzed nonstop. The administrator stood at the head of the table, spine straight, voice steady. "This cannot happen again," she said. "Not here. Not anywhere with our name on it." Legal cleared his throat. "We're exposed," he said. "Video of the incident is already circulating internally." "If it leaks, it will," the administrator said. "And when it does, I want our response ready." Immediate revision of emergency intake policy. Mandatory retraining. No payment discussions until stabilization. No exceptions. HR nodded. And the doctor? He's suspended pending review, she said. But this isn't about one man. It's about culture. A board member shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hawley hasn't made a statement. He doesn't need to, the administrator replied. He already did by staying. As if summoned, Lucas entered the room moments later, unannounced but unmistakable. Conversation died on impact. He didn't sit. I won't be issuing a press release, he said calmly. Not today. This isn't about optics. One board member tried a smile. Of course, Lucas, we're grateful for your generosity. This wasn't generosity, Lucas interrupted, not unkindly. It was responsibility. Silence followed. I fund hospitals because I believe healthcare is a public trust, he continued. If money becomes a gate, the trust collapses. Fix the gate. The administrator nodded. We will. Lucas looked around the table. And don't wait for me to show up next time. With that, he left. Word spread fast. Nurses talked in low voices. Residents read revised memos on their phones. A senior physician pulled a junior aside and said, if a child ever begs you again, you listen first. By midday, Jonah was allowed back into the ICU. Maribel was more awake now, groggy but aware. Her eyes filled when she saw Lucas standing behind her son. He's the man, Jonah said softly. The one who helped. Maribel struggled to speak, voice thin. Thank you, she whispered. Lucas stepped closer. You did the hard part, he said. You survived. Tears slipped down her temples. They said no. Lucas nodded. They were wrong. Later, a social worker arrived with a stack of papers and a smile. Temporary housing, she explained. Food assistance. Follow-up care. Physical therapy. Transportation vouchers. She paused. And educational support for Jonah. Jonah's eyes widened. School? Lucas chuckled. Turns out paperwork can be heroic too. When Maribel slept again, Jonah followed Lucas to the cafeteria. Cameras hovered at a distance now, held back by quiet instructions. Are people mad at you? Jonah asked between bites. Some, Lucas admitted. Change makes people nervous, even when it's good. Especially then. In the afternoon, the administrator approached Lucas privately. The board wants to name a fund after you, she said. Emergency Access Initiative. Your name would help, Lucas shook his head. Name it after her. She blinked. After Maribel? After the first person who needed it, Lucas said. Let the next family see a name that looks like theirs. The administrator swallowed. All right. By evening, the hospital's front doors opened to a small crowd. A reporter shouted questions. Lucas ignored them. He walked Jonah outside for fresh air. The sky burned orange and pink, a reminder that the world kept turning no matter how close it came to stopping. Will you go away now? Jonah asked quietly. Lucas considered. I'll go home, he said. But I won't disappear. How will we find you? Lucas reached into his pocket and handed Jonah a simple card. No logo, just a number. You won't need to, he said. But if you do call. Jonah held the card like it might vanish. I thought rich people didn't talk to kids like me. Lucas knelt so they were eye level. Rich people are just people, he said. And people make choices. Inside, alarms beeped and steadied. A nurse smiled at Jonah through the glass. The hospital felt different now, less like a fortress, more like a place where stories bent toward mercy. As night settled again, Lucas prepared to leave. The administrator walked him to the door. You changed us, she said. Lucas shook his head. You were already capable, he replied. You just needed to remember. Upstairs, Maribel slept peacefully for the first time in days. Jonah watched her chest rise and fall, counting not flickers but breaths. Each one felt like a promise kept. And somewhere between the hum of machines and the quiet resolve of a building forced to confront itself, a line had been crossed, this time in the right direction. The unthinkable had set something in motion, and it wasn't finished yet. Asterisk. The day Maribel finally left the ICU, the hospital felt like it was holding its breath. Jonah walked beside her wheelchair, one hand gripping the armrest, the other clutching a small paper bag that held everything they owned that mattered: documents, a phone charger, a worn photograph of the two of them from years ago, before sickness had made time feel cruel. Nurses lined the corridor, pretending to be busy but watching quietly as mother and son passed. Some smiled. Some looked away ashamed. All of them understood that this walk meant more than a discharge. It meant survival. At the end of the hall, the elevator doors opened. Lucas Halle stood there, not in a suit this time, but in a simple gray sweater and jeans. No cameras. No assistants. Just him. Maribel's eyes widened. You came back, she said, her voice stronger now, though still fragile. I promised I wouldn't disappear, Lucas replied. The elevator ride was silent except for its soft hum. Jonah watched the numbers tick down, feeling something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Not fear, not relief, but certainty. The kind that told him his life had just split into a before and an after. Outside, a car waited. Not a limousine, just a clean, ordinary sedan. Where are we going? Jonah asked. Home, Lucas said. Jonah frowned. But we don't have one. Lucas opened the car door for Maribel. You do now. They drove through the city, past streets Jonah knew too well, alleys where he'd slept, corners where he'd begged strangers for change while pretending not to be hungry. The car didn't stop there. It kept going. Past neighborhoods he'd only seen on television. Trees, quiet. Lawns trimmed like they mattered. When the car stopped, Jonah didn't move. In front of them stood a modest house. Nothing extravagant. Just warm light glowing through windows. A small ramp already built near the steps. This is temporary, Lucas said carefully. As long as you need. Maribel covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. I don't understand, she whispered. Why us? Lucas met her gaze. Because the system failed you, he said. And fixing systems starts with people. Inside, the house smelled like fresh paint and clean sheets. The refrigerator was full. The pantry stocked. A bedroom prepared with medical equipment discreetly tucked away, dignity preserved. Jonah wandered from room to room in disbelief, touching walls as if they might vanish. That night, after Maribel slept in a real bed for the first time in months, Jonah sat at the kitchen table with Lucas. Are we in trouble? Jonah asked suddenly. Because people like us aren't supposed to get this much help. Lucas leaned back. Help isn't a crime, he said. But withholding it should be. Jonah nodded slowly. The doctor, he said. What happened to him? Lucas didn't rush the answer. The investigation confirmed what we already knew, he said. He violated protocol. More importantly, he violated trust. Jonah swallowed. Is he sorry? Yes, Lucas said. But remorse doesn't undo damage. It just decides what happens next. What will happen? He won't practice medicine again, Lucas said quietly. Not because of me. Because of what he chose. Jonah absorbed that. Justice didn't sound loud. It sounded final. In the weeks that followed, the story broke anyway. not as gossip, but as reckoning. Headlines didn't scream. They asked questions. Hospital denies emergency care over payment. Billionaire intervenes. But Lucas refused interviews. Instead, policy changes spoke for him. Hospitals across the state adopted the new Emergency Access Fund. Doctors were retrained. Payment discussions moved out of trauma rooms and into offices where they belonged. And somewhere along the way, the culture shifted. Jonah started school. On his first day, he stood in front of a mirror wearing clothes that fit, backpack new but simple. Maribel watched from the doorway, her face still pale but smiling with a strength Jonah hadn't seen in years. "What if they ask questions?" Jonah asked. "Tell the truth," she said. "We survived." At school, Jonah learned fast. Not just math and reading, but how to trust quiet moments. How to raise his hand. How to believe adults might listen. His teachers noticed. A counselor recommended advanced classes. A principal shook his hand and said, "You have a future here." Jonah believed him. Lucas visited sometimes. Never announced. Never long. He'd sit at the kitchen table, drink coffee, ask Jonah about school. About books. About what he wanted to be. "A doctor," Jonah said one afternoon. Lucas smiled. "That figures. But a different kind," Jonah added quickly. "One who listens first." Months passed. Maribel regained strength. Physical therapy hurt, but she endured it with the same stubborn will that had kept her alive. One afternoon, she stood without assistance for the first time. Jonah cried harder than she did. Life didn't become perfect. It became possible. One evening, Lucas invited them to dinner not at a restaurant, but at a small community center downtown. The room was full of people. Nurses, doctors, administrators, families. A banner hung quietly at the back. The Maribel Access Fund. Maribel froze when she saw it. "Lucas," she whispered, "I told you." "I know," he said gently. "But this isn't about honoring you. It's about reminding everyone why the door stays open." Lucas stepped to the podium. The room fell silent. "I won't talk long," he said. "Because this isn't my story." He gestured toward Maribel and Jonah. "This is about a mother who was told her life had a price tag, and a child who refused to accept that answer." The room shifted, emotion tightening throats. "We don't measure a society by its wealth," Lucas continued. "We measure it by who we refuse to abandon." He stepped down. Applause didn't explode. It rose slowly, deliberately, until it filled the room with something deeper than noise agreement. Afterward, Jonah stood beside Lucas, watching people thank his mother. "You didn't save us," Jonah said quietly. Lucas looked surprised. "No?" "You just opened the door," Jonah said. "She walked through it." Lucas smiled. "That's usually how it works." Years later, Jonah would remember that night clearly. The lights. The banner. The feeling that the world, once so sharp and unfair, could be bent if someone brave enough leaned hard enough against it. For Lucas Halle, it wasn't a legacy moment. It was a correction. And for a hospital that once chose money over mercy, it became the night they learned the cost of refusing care was far greater than any bill they could have charged. Because when the unthinkable finally happened, it didn't destroy them. It changed everything.